This is Feeling is Healing, episode 3, and today we're going to be talking about relationship truth bombs. So, this is kind of based on the fact that my relationships during my life have been a total car crash. But also, in the sessions that I do, it seems to me that most people come to me with issues about relationships. And something else that strikes me is that, we go to school and we do all the literacy and numeracy and the science and the geography and the history and all that stuff. But we don't really do much learning about relationships, which probably explains why we're all a bit sort of lost at sea. So the reason that I'm talking about relationships today is because it's all kind of woven in with trauma. And the reason why most of us are sort of a bit clueless about what to do is because it all comes from childhood. So I'm going to be talking about compromise. Now, this, I'm just going to put in a trigger alert here, because whenever I've tried to talk to people about this in the past, people deflect it back to me. And I don't think people want to hear this, because I think it's part of the agenda, one of the agendas that we're all subject to in our life. So compromise is all sort of woven into codependence. Codependence kind of goes hand in hand with narcissism. Codependence leads to chronic independence, which leads to interdependence. So there is a happy ending. And at the end, I'm going to talk briefly about the 5 love languages as well, which were kind of discovered and innovated by a guy who was a marriage guidance counselor, and his name was Gary Chapman. And he realized his life's work was helping couples with their relationships. And he realized that there were 5 very important ways that people give and receive love. Now, most of us don't know that there are certain ways that us and our loved ones prefer to give and receive love. But as soon as you know this about yourself, and as soon as you know this about your loved ones, it can change your relationships for the better profoundly. So I'll get to that at the end. So yeah, there might be quite a bit of triggering stuff here, but that's just how it is. So compromise, I'm going to start with that. So with compromise, most people, and I do think it is most people, believe that compromise is necessary, and that it is also, as well as being necessary, it's also kind of like an act of love to compromise. Now, I disagree. And I know this from experience, and I did quite a lot of research about it. And I first heard about this perspective on compromise from a spiritual teacher called Teal Swan, who I've been following for probably about 12 years now. So this is a concept that people think is normal, which isn't. And I think there are a lot of things that people normalize that shouldn't be normalized. So yeah, I do think this is part of an agenda that affects our happiness and relationships. So we've been led to believe that it's virtuous and that we should compromise for other people. And many people believe that it's a sign of love if we give up something for someone else. So this is connected to, if you kind of zoom out and zoom up and kind of look at the world, there's a big game of I win, you lose going on in many different ways, many systems, and also in our relationships. So you can think about this sort of in your marriages, in your friendships, in your family relationships with your kids, your cousins, your sisters, your brothers, and also with your colleagues and your boss. So what about win-win? Because this is another one that we don't believe is fully possible. And if we think that things have to be I win, you lose, because that's how we've been programmed, then we don't necessarily go for a win, a win-win. Now, I believe that win-win is always possible. Now, in relationships, I think that a win-win can be found in most relationships, but if it can't, I think it's a sign of incompatibility. If you believe in compromise, then it's either pointing to a compatibility issue, or you haven't actually investigated whether there's a win-win. So if you're experiencing compromise and you're not really enjoying it, I would suggest going to the place in your head and with your partner and with your boss, with your kids, like whoever this is with, and trying to imagine what a win-win would look like. What would that mean for you, and what would that mean for the other person? So this is quite triggering, but I would suggest to all listening that when we compromise, we have not actually found a genuine win-win. We have decided that a bad deal is better than no deal. So you could argue that when we compromise, we are agreeing to pain for someone else. So this is based on our belief that we cannot have it all. And we believe that we can't have it all because our parents told us that we couldn't. So just because our parents told us that we couldn't doesn't mean that we can't. But I think if we work on our trauma and our limiting beliefs and our negative trapped emotion, then I believe that we can move the belief that we have to play I win, you lose. And we can move the belief that we can't have it all and that we have to give up a part of ourselves for someone else. So this comes from us as children. We have to shut ourselves down for our parents in order to survive. And it might sound a bit brutal, but that's what we've all done on a chronic level. So if somebody loved you, why would they ask you to do that? And why would they see that as an act of love that you're doing for them? And then equally, if you truly loved yourself, why would you abandon yourself for someone else? So if you look at like the definitions of what love really is and what trust really is, trust is to be able to rely on someone to benefit from caring for your best interests. So I'm going to say that again. It's a safe and secure form of dependence. So to trust someone is to be able to rely on them to benefit from caring for your best interests. And then equally, love is when you take another person as if they are a part of you. So if you hurt that other person, you can't hurt that other person without hurting yourself. So when you're compromising, I would argue that that's not love. So this is quite controversial. And when I first heard this, I was like, really? Because it's so ingrained into our consciousness that we should give ourselves up for someone else. But this is based on a belief that comes from trauma. So in theory, if you can reverse and heal that trauma, and then you can align with other people who have done that, then you can have it all. So obviously other opinions are available, and not everybody might agree with that. So I'm gonna leave a bit of time for questions at the end and stuff. So have a little think about how you are compromising, in relationships and how other people might be compromising for you. And then also think about how many arguments it's caused. And then think about, what did you do? Did you come up with a solution? Did you agree to disagree? Because I don't believe that agreeing to disagree is a good idea, because I don't think it's a solution. I think, again, it's a compromise. Anyways, so I'm going to go on to talk about codependence. So there's a misconception with codependence. So people often confuse this with being a form of dependency. So it kind of is. All right, I'll kind of get more deeply into it, but it isn't necessarily a bad thing. So I think that there is a dark and a light to everything. So there's a lot of different ways that I could explain codependence, but I think the best way is to give some examples and to keep it as simple as possible. So codependence usually goes hand in hand with narcissism. So in any kind of relationship dysfunction, there's usually a codependent, and on the other side of things, there's usually a person who's more narcissistic. Now, some people say that people who are narcissistic are incurable and there's nothing that anyone can do to heal that person. I don't agree, actually. And I don't think any of this is it's not like a permanent sort of personality disorder. It's actually a relationship style. It's like an adaptation to relationship dysfunction. And again, it comes from trauma, from the way that we were parented. So codependency, in a very simple way, is when others or somebody else needs you to stay the way you are. So bearing in mind that we're always growing, we're always expanding, you might have experienced in your life somebody in your life needing you to stay stuck, or to stay small, or to stay sick. So this is a way when somebody needs you to need them. Not always a good thing. So yeah, this is an adaptive relationship style that goes hand in hand with narcissism. So we learn this in childhood to adapt to dysfunctional relationships. Now we can undo this, like we can undo everything, and we can undo it by becoming aware of it. As soon as we shine the light of awareness on all of this stuff, we're already halfway there. So don't despair. But I do think that this is an epidemic that everybody suffers from, and we're all on the scale somewhere. So we've all had this to some degree. So when we're children, we need to get our needs met. And very often we have to shut ourselves down to meet the needs of our parents. And that means that we can go one of two ways. So often, when we can't get our needs met as children in our circumstances, we will either go one way into kind of selfishness, where it's kind of more of a sort of snatch and grab, every man for himself kind of thing. Now that, if you go that way, down that road, that leads to kind of a more narcissistic relationships kind of style. If you don't do that and you go in the opposite direction, then you tend to manipulate to get your needs met. What I found sort of on the spiritual path, people that would class themselves as awake, most of those people, I think, are probably going in the direction of the codependent relationship style, and a lot of us have had relationships with people that we would say are narcissistic. So I definitely became manipulative to get my needs met. So I remember as a child having like a big list of worries in my head. There were things that I needed, things that I was frightened of, and there was no one looking after me. And the people that were supposed to be looking after me were actually very cruel, and I was in danger. So in order to get my needs met, I spent the whole time thinking, and trying to figure out ways that I could get the thing that I needed. And that's how I remember a lot of my childhood. So if you go in the opposite direction, you are basically, you just become selfish, and you take from other people, and you become very self-centered, selfish, and you care more about yourself and getting your needs met than you do about other people. And other people, as you kind of go on that way, sort of become more and more invisible to you. So some examples of all of this codependence. So you might choose closeness with a person, but in doing that, you are denying your own personal truth. Or a person might keep someone else sick so that they never get abandoned and left by that person. Or someone might keep themselves small instead of expanding and growing to meet someone else's need to feel good about themselves. So the thing with codependence is it's usually the trapped emotion that's associated with that is usually kind of like a low self-worth, a low self-esteem, like a feeling of unworthiness or worthlessness. And it's basically the chronic kind of giving up of self to be in a relationship. And it never works. I was in a very, very long-term relationship with somebody for 24 years, and it was very codependent. And I had to get out of that because I grew, and I grew, and I was growing, and the other person wasn't growing in the way that I was. So I tried to fix the relationship, like for about 5 or 6 years, thinking that there was something wrong and even blaming myself for it. Until I realized that we had been together for such a long time that we had actually grown apart and become incompatible. So just because you might be compatible with someone at the beginning of a relationship doesn't mean that you stay compatible, because if one person grows and then the other person grows more slowly, you're not necessarily going in the right direction, and you can become out of alignment. So that's a bit triggering as well to think about. But we have all been led to believe that we're in this scenario where together forever is the thing. Sometimes the way that society looks at relationships is, the success criteria there is often that longevity. If you're with someone for a long time, then people often see that as a successful relationship. But I would argue that that's not the case. And, my parents are still together now, and they don't like each other at all. And I think they should probably have separated a long time ago. And I know that a lot of relationships are like that, and it's almost like people are trauma bonded, and they can't imagine what life would be like on their own. So that sort of takes us to the next part on the healing path. A lot of us try to heal this codependence, and on the most part we do a pretty good job, and we build ourselves up, and we become aware of ourselves. We become aware of how to become more sovereign. We become more conscious of when we're being abused, when we're abusing other people, what our boundaries are, and what's important to us, and what works and doesn't work. So I made the mistake of coming out of codependence and going straight into chronic independence. So this is another illusion. We've been led to believe that independence is virtuous. And in some ways, I guess it's an improvement, because you've stepped into your power. You've figured out a way to be the person that you want to be in the world, do the things that you want to do. But unfortunately, this doesn't work either. So I'm actually about to move house because I've realized that I've been chronically independent, and it's pretty much almost nearly killed me. So codependence didn't agree with me. Chronic independence hasn't agreed with me. I've decided to house share with some friends because I've realized that being chronically independent is an impossible life, and we shouldn't be all living in a box behind a locked door on our own. It's absolutely insane, and it doesn't work. We're a relational species, and we all rely on each other to survive. So there's, if you think about, you know, feminism and everything that happened, you know, there's a dark and a light side to everything. You know, now women are not regarded as part of a man's property and sold kind of with bought and sold with land. So, you know, we're also allowed to vote. But the dark side of the feminist agenda is that, you know, a lot of women are now kind of feeling like they don't need a man. I would argue that women need men and men need women. And if you kind of like look at society in general, you know, we've got chronic isolation, chronic independence. I think the isolation has come about as a result of the chronic independence as well. We need a village and we need a community, and there are no people on earth who can do everything, and there are no people on earth who know everything. I mean, I don't know how to do everything. I know how to do a lot of things. When I was chronically independent, I learned things that I didn't know how to do because there was no one else to help me do them. So I've been a single parent for about 6 years, and I do co-parent with another person, my daughter's dad. But my community has changed a lot over the years that I've separated from him. I've lost a lot of people because of my beliefs about the world and my medical choices. I was abandoned by my family. I've needed to sort of live through the horror of trying to meet all my needs myself to see that I can't do it. And I nearly didn't make it through that period. So, you know, exhaustion, mental health issues, a lack of resources. The list goes on and on and on. And there is an epidemic of loneliness, and mental health collapse is the result of trying to be chronically independent. So we can't do everything on our own. I would actually argue as well that many people, particularly in long-term relationships, believe that they can get all their needs met through one person. Excuse me. I seriously doubt that. And I know that there's a lot of people trying to do that. But I would argue that it's actually quite abusive to have that expectation of another person. And what I see in therapy sessions when I sort of work with relationships is that there's quite a big difference between what men are looking for and what women are looking for, and how they go about getting their their needs met. So something I've realized is men are very confused by women. Men don't know what women want, and women don't tell them. They don't tell them because they expect them to know. And they almost say to themselves that the men in their lives should know. They should know, and they should give it to me without me saying anything. Now, this leaves men very confused because men need to be told directly. So this might all sound very general, but these are kind of like patterns that I've picked up that I'm mentioning today because I've dealt with them so many times, and in the dealing of them and sort of helping people become aware of them, people have found improvement in their relationships. So if it is a bit triggering and it does sound a bit general, I'm sorry about that, but this is what I found. So men often feel manipulated and almost kind of tricked and kind of duped by women. What I think really helps men is if women, instead of taking them down, instead of like taking down the man for not providing the thing that you assumed that he should know that you wanted, is be direct and just go directly there, ask for what you want and talk about that. And then he can decide whether or not he's up for that. And also men need their confidence taken care of by women, because since feminism, men are very confused by women, and they do need this directness, and they do need to have their confidence taken care of by women, for sure. So if you turn the tables, from men, women need protection and safety. Now I can almost hear the gasping from the feminists. It's just how it is. We can keep pretending and being chronically independent and saying that we don't need men, but we do. And what we're looking for is men to provide a container for us. So women, obviously, physically are the weaker species. So I heard about an experiment where somebody who was doing kind of like some public speaking, they asked all the women in the room to put their hands up about the last times that they felt very unsafe, like physically unsafe, fearing for their lives. And they kind of did, you know, have you kind of like felt physically unsafe, fearing for your life, kind of like in the last month, you know, and then in the last 2 weeks, and then in the last week, and then in the last couple of days, and then in the last day, like literally today. And every single person in the room, you know, put their hand up. They have feared for their life, you know, at some point. And then when it kind of got whittled down, it was only the women that were left, you know, with their hands up. You know, they felt unsafe all of those times. And the majority of women in the room actually still had their hand up when it was, did you feel unsafe and fear for your life today? So actually women, because of, you know, we are the weaker sex in terms of, you know, our physicality, we have become very, very sort of normalized to unsafety. And all it takes is for a guy that looks quite big, you know, well built, to be walking on the opposite side of the road to you when it's kind of dusk and there's not really many other people around. Now this happens all the time, you know. It's been normalized. Like, we are not safe in the world as much as men are, and this is like hardwired into our central nervous systems. So we need a man to make us feel safe, to help us feel safe, and to protect us, whether we like it or not. So this is about positive ownership. So ownership is a bit of a triggering word as well, because who wants to be owned? Like, no one. We want to be free. But how about if you look at ownership in terms of positive ownership, in terms of belonging? Now that's a different kind of vibe to being owned. So women need protection and safety from men, and they need belonging. They need to be positively owned by a man. Now, often women get together in relationships with men who have been the sons of feminist mums. Now, sometimes those sons of feminist mums have been very confused about what women want and have kind of felt the burden of what men have done to women over the ages, and they become not what women are looking for. You know, I don't quite know how to put that. Women need to be contained by a man, but they often end up with a man that doesn't contain them because they don't think that's what women want. So women are looking to be positively owned by a man. I saw a meme recently that kind of summed all of this up in kind of a lot less words than I'm using. And it was something along the lines of, men are looking for a woman to lead them back to their heart, and women are looking for a man to protect them so that they can do that. So that's a very, very simple way of putting it. Women want to be safe to walk the earth. and men can help them do that. And the women are the ones that are going to lead the men back to the heart. So this is about like men and women rising together, which we do obviously is necessary for progress. There seems to be a lot of a lot of division kind of on that issue. If we could all rise together, that would be amazing. But most people don't seem to know how to go about that. And so many of us don't know how to go about having a relationship that works either. So I sort of got really sidetracked there. So I'm just going to go back to, chronic independence, which I think has led to the epidemic of loneliness and mental health epidemic as well. We can't do everything on our own. So this is leading us to interdependence. So I think it would be a very good guide for everybody to move from codependence into independence, because I think it's a necessary stepping stone, even though it's also an illusion. Interdependence is where I think we're all going, and I think it's inevitable. So I believe that interdependence is what is required for a healthy society, for healthy relationships, for healthy workplaces, healthy business, healthy families. It's the natural order of things which we've been led away from. So I think that it's up to all of us alone to decide what is a healthy exchange for us and what isn't, because I think that's going to vary from individual to individual. We all need to establish our own boundaries, what it is that we are specifically looking for. And that is going to be a very diverse thing. So the definition of interdependence, so think families, think society, think workplaces, think business, like anywhere where people are relating. So interdependence is when two or more beings can be mutually reliant on each other in a safe and symbiotic way, having a symbiotic bond. So it comes back to trust and love again, relying on each other while maintaining each person's freedom, autonomy, and identity. So this is about allowing each person to be themselves without compromise. So this is dependency when it is in alignment. It's an antidote to codependency, and it's an antidote to narcissism. And interdependence naturally serves, romantic relationship, family relationship, teamwork, friendship. This is how to help to create a healthy social system where everyone is reaching their potential, expressing their excellence, being received while giving. Everyone in that system feels supported. It is a win, win, win. And this is totally possible. And I think this is the direction that we're all going. And anyone that's sort of like going in the direction of intentional community, it's not easy. It's not easy. Me and my friend Tim that are listening, like we've been thinking about community for a couple of years, and we went and had a look around a few communities a couple of summers ago. And most of them were completely dysfunctional. And I kind of felt like the main thing that people were struggling with was conflict and not knowing how to survive a conflict, not knowing what to do, and kind of being unaware of trauma. And, I kind of feel like if people can be taught that the triggers that are causing the conflict actually come from trauma and they're not about that person that's pissed you off or whatever, if you can help people within that community understand what the triggers are, where they've come from, what to do about it, how to heal them, then onward, But it was an interesting summer, and we saw lots of different ways that people were trying to do this. So it's brilliant that people are trying to do this. It's not easy though, because we're all very damaged, and I would say that dysfunctional relationships are the norm, which is also a bit controversial. But that's kind of how it is. But I see a community as, where every single person knows themselves enough to know what they are excellent at. So, you could have this guy over here, he's cars, he's like the mechanic, he knows how to fix the vehicles. This person over here, their education for the kids. This person's therapy, that person's cookery. Every single thing that you need in your life is dealt with by somebody in that community. And then all the kids that are in that community, they don't just have one set of adults or one adult even to meet their needs. They have a boatload, and they have a diversity of people that can help them. So they actually get to choose their own support. This is the future, and I kind of feel like all the stuff that's kind of going on in the systems right now, the governments, which I don't want to go deeply into here because it's not this space is not for that. But if you think about the governments, if you think about the systems and what's going on, it's a codependent narcissist thing. It's kind of like it's our trauma that's being shown to us. That it's kind of like the government. If you just replace the government with your parents, that's what we're doing. We're unwinding our trauma, the way that we were parented. That's what's playing out in the systems right now. All of this kind of do as you're told, and the gazillion limiting beliefs that there are kind of that we took on as children, and when we shut ourselves down. So I'm going to finish on a sort of more positive note, and then I'm going to do some questions and stuff. So this guy, Gary Chapman, he was a marriage guidance counselor, I think, for the majority of his life. And he came to see chronic patterns that he couldn't unsee. And he started to realize that we all have in our personalities kind of very, very specific ways that we give love and that we receive love. So there are 5 of them. If you go online, I'll see if I can find the link later and I'll share it on the channel. There's a little test that you can do to find out what your love languages are. But anyway, you might get an inkling just from me reading out what they are. So there's 5 of them. So there's physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, and acts of service. So a lot of people have more than one love language. So I've got 3. Mine are physical touch, words of affirmation, and quality time. Sometimes people most of us are going to appreciate all of those. But the important thing is here is that sometimes our loved ones will be giving us love and we might not realize that they are. So like if you've got someone in your life who will do the washing up, or they'll go to the shop for you, or they'll go and get the takeaway, or they'll fix the car for you, or whatever it is, like acts of service for them might be a very important way of them showing their love and giving their love. But if you don't see that as a way that they're giving their love, then you kind of almost don't receive their love. You might just take them for granted because they're doing that thing for you. This really is a thing for a lot of people. Receiving gifts and giving gifts. Now, sometimes people can see that as something that's shallow. Like if you need that thing to be, if you need someone to give you gifts, in order to feel loved, like gift giving is like a really beautiful thing. If somebody gives you a gift that's like perfect for you, they know you, like they are intimately aware of who you are. And they've taken time to choose that exact thing for you. They might have planned an experience for you. They might have bought you exactly what you would have asked for had they asked you. It's a skill. giving and receiving gifts. Now, obviously there are people in the world that are going to be a bit shallow or whatever, but like this is a thing, this is a real thing. Giving and receiving gifts is a valid love language for a lot of people. And if you're unaware that that is the thing that enables that person in your life to give and receive love, you know, to their highest potential, like you'd rather know that, wouldn't you? So quality time is kind of like a really obvious one. A lot of people really need to have that time spent, especially in this day and age with everybody so busy. Words of affirmation basically means when someone tells you why they love you. They love you when you do, they love it when you do this. They love you because you do that. Now, some people really need to hear that. Physical touch is a very obvious one as well. Now, a lot of this also comes from how we were programmed as children. So if you grew up in a house where there wasn't much physical love expressed, like you didn't have the hugs, you didn't have the physical closeness, then physical touch can become a really, really important way to receive love from others. When you know what your loved ones' love languages are and you know what your own are, it can be absolutely profound, the changes. So I would suggest, like, if you're living in a household with family members or whoever you're living with, where it feels like you're disconnected, it feels like you've become out of sync with each other, I would go online, do the love languages test, find out how you give and receive love, what your preference is, and then get your loved ones to do it, and then make lists of how you personally would feel loved. And then stick it on the kitchen wall. And then everybody in that house knows how you would feel loved. And then you can look at their lists and you can know how they would feel loved. So it might be kind of like a silly little thing like, you know, I feel loved when you come up behind me and you put your arms around me when I didn't know you were there. Or it could be, I really feel loved when you put the dinner on before I get home so I don't have to do that. Or I feel really loved when someone's unloaded the dishwasher and I didn't even know who it was and they didn't even like need to be recognized for that or whatever. Like it can be so beautiful, something like that. Just one thing that someone's done for you or one thing that they've said to you in the way that they know is like really important for you. Like all of this stuff is so important and it can shift your frequency massively. It can change everything. So a lot of people really feel disconnected from their friends and family in this way, and there's no need for it. There's so much stuff to access online for free that can kind of give you an insight into the people around you and can kind of reignite the spark that you first felt when you met that person. Anyway, it's easy to find. There's a book as well. You can read The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now. So if anybody would like to ask anything, then go for it. You can put your hands up or whatever, unmute yourselves.
You said so much good stuff, Jen.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, there's so many things I could go to. I'm just like, yeah, where to start really. I just wanted to reflect that as really good coverage of these many different aspects of relationships and the struggles within, you know.
Thank you. It's funny because like I was thinking about I can't remember who it was. Somebody said, you know, when we were looking around communities, someone said that a community collapsed because the vegetarians and the vegans couldn't agree on like who was going to put their cheese in the fridge, and the vegans felt like their cheese was getting contaminated by the vegetarians' cheese, and then they argued about it so much that their community collapsed. Instead of just getting 2 fridges, they could have just got 2 fridges. And like, you know, the conflict that sometimes people get into, it sort of becomes so insane and like so difficult. and it's connected to so much deep stuff that kind of is left unacknowledged in people's psyches, that if you just know how to do that, it can change your life. It can change everything.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something else as well you said I thought was really poignant out of all of it was the use of the word many times of chronic,
Yeah.
and for me, like, I mean, I look at my own life, you know, and like problems I've had, whether that's, you know, more to do with relationships or health, and I'm like, okay, these are really chronic problems, you know, rather than acute, you know, quick ouch, deal with it. These are like long-term chronic issues that, you know, require a real commitment to working on the self to actually address them and heal them. And such is the scale of it that most people don't want to do it. And certain things will happen in your life again and again that will force you to do it. And sometimes you have to, you know, get a similar hit numerous times, you know, before you really will see something from enough. You've seen enough of it, or you've seen enough from similar angles where you're like, shit, I've got to change. I've got to learn my lessons, you know, and I've got to heal my wounds. But yeah, I'm just trying to, like, you know, without going into a monologue, encapsulating what you're saying. I mean, there was so much good stuff in there, honestly.
Yeah, like chronic is how I would describe a lot of problems right now, because something becomes chronic when you don't deal with it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not trying to deal with it, but it's that you're not getting to the bottom of it. You know, even if you're trying, you're not getting to the bottom of it. And I think, like, most chronic issues on the planet are caused by emotion that people are resisting. And it always comes back to that for me. And I think that, like, so many issues of the world, like everything, like if you zoom out, like from the microcosm to the macrocosm, so much is about resistance and kind of not going there. We just don't go there. You know, if you go there, if you look at what's going on, you allow it to be there, it makes sense that it would be happening, let it be there without trying to change anything, then from that place you can heal. You can never heal anything from a place of, I'm not going to look, 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 or I don't want this to be happening, I don't want this to be happening, I don't want this to be happening. Like, it can only be healed from, this is happening. This is,
yeah, this is where our coping mechanisms come in, don't they?
Yeah.
It's like we'll come up against something that's particularly unpleasant, you know, and we don't want to deal with, and then we'll dive into those coping mechanisms because we think it will get us to where we want to be faster. But
yeah.
As I've discovered many times in my life, many times, that's actually the longer road. You know, it's like you can take what looks like the easy path, you know, and what you think is going to be an easy life and give you quick results, which nearly always leads to more pain and more struggle and more complexity. Or you can take the harder path of doing the work, which is going to lead you somewhere much more peaceful and better for you over time. You know, and at the ripe old age of 44, I'm only really starting to see that, you know.
Yeah, we can jump over it. We can keep jumping over it. We can do that for like a lifetime, like several lifetimes, but it's not going to get us to the place that we're going. Like the only thing that's going to get you to the place that you're going is to love yourself enough to look at the difficult stuff and to admit to yourself the things that are really happening and the things that really happened.
Yeah,
as well.
I just wanted to give other people a chance to speak, sorry.
Yeah, anybody else fancy having a chat?
Nobody's jumping in, so I'll just quickly jump in, Jen, and to say thank you. I think your shows are going from strength to strength, and I'm looking forward to them evolving more and more and more.
Yeah, Thanks, Andy. Well, I mean, I never know what I'm going to talk about, but it does always become really obvious. So yeah. I think relationships are like a really obvious one to talk about because everyone's in a bit of a mess with it from where I'm standing, including me. You know, I'm not actually in a relationship with a person in terms of like a romantic partner at the moment. So in some ways, people might point their finger at me and go, who is she to talk to people about relationships? But yeah, I have had a lot of them, and it's been a learning journey for
Yeah,
sure.
I've been out of romantic relationships now for 17 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's ages.
So I was 40 years old when I had, or when I was 40, that was when my sort of new life began as a chronic independent.
Yeah.
But a happy one. I'm a happy chronic independent.
Yeah. Yeah.
What happened was that the environment that I was working in at the time was the nightclub industry. And obviously relationships quickly came and quickly fell away for various different reasons. But the prime number one reason was jealousy. Not on my part, on their part. Anyway, it bottled down to the fact that when I looked back on my relationships, because I did everything backwards. I settled down and had my family when I was young, when I was 20, 21, when I got married. I had my daughters, divorced at 28, hooked up with another woman after that, had my son with her. And then after that, that's when I started doing what I should have been doing when I was 20.
Yeah.
So by the time I got to 40, I was like, no, when I look back, my happiest moments, or when I felt the happiest, was in between relationships, when I was single.
Yeah.
Even though I anchored after being in relationships and wanted to be with a woman.
Yeah.
I thought my actual happiness came from not.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, it's not all, there's a dark and a light, you know, there is, you know, I've loved being on my own, loved it, but it doesn't work for me long term. But yeah, like I think you have to have that time on your own to sort of figure out who you are, because none of us know who we are. So it's lovely that you've spent time doing that, you know.
Yeah, and part of what you were saying as well resonated. One of the things that I came to the conclusion to many years ago was you need to be able to love yourself from within, the good bits and the bad bits. And if you can love yourself from within, and you can then project that love out into the world, and you find somebody else who's done the same, then you're sharing the love between you. And rather than having somebody come into your life that depends on you for love, because then the way I looked at it was they become resentful of the fact that you have that power then over them. Yeah. Because they can't live without you, or they can't be without you, or they need you in the life to fill whatever's missing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my little take on that.
Yeah.
Share the love you find inside yourself.
Yeah, that's brilliant,
I love
Andy.
that. Yeah. I was just going to say, you're just talking there about incompatibility, and you see that, you obviously seen that many times. Yeah, all that.
Yeah. So I don't know, Craig. Craig's been in and out. I don't know if Craig wants to say anything. Oh, and Anita's just popped in right at the end. Hi, Anita.
But yeah, I just want to say something that has really helped me teach my daughter about relationships. So my daughter's 14. When she's kind of like quite happy now in her friendships and stuff that she's got at school. But a couple of years ago, she was quite unhappy and sort of unsure of herself. And she seemed to have got into sort of friendships with girls that weren't kind. And I sort of tried to think of like a really simple way to put it. And I kind of wished, you know, I thought about myself when I was that age, and I wondered what would have really helped me understand friendships and relationships sort of from a young age. And so I put it to her that when you're with a friend or in any relationship, you know, with your teacher, your boss, like your cousin, like whoever it is, do you feel exhausted by that person or do you feel energized? So that was one way that I put it to her. And another really simple way of putting it to kids to kind of teach them, are you in a relationship that's healthy or not? So, yeah, the energized thing or the exhausted thing, but also, does it feel like that person is taking from you more than they're giving? Does it feel like you're giving, 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 and they're taking, taking, taking? Or does it feel like you give to each other? Because that seemed to really land with her. And then she was able to like diagnose every relationship that she was in. And it was a really simple way of helping her understand what a healthy relationship is supposed to feel like. Because, you know, I went through my whole life until I was in my 40s, feeling really uncomfortable in relationships and wondering why certain people just made me feel exhausted. And like, why was I different with this person than I was with that person? And, you know, why did I feel like I was invisible in some relationships, but visible in others? You know, it was a total mystery to me. And I went through loads of pain. So that's like a really simple way of putting it to kids. You know, if your children in your life are being bullied or are having trouble with relationships, put it to them that way. You know, who is it that makes you feel good and energized? Who is it that makes you feel exhausted and taken from? I think most of us, you know, middle-aged and older generation peeps, like we didn't really have any kind of input at all about relationships, and we've had to sort of learn it all through experience, which obviously is very, very valuable, but hard. And it's taken most of us years of pain to fully understand it, and most of us still don't fully understand it. And yeah, obviously I'm still on the road. But yeah, we've got a few minutes left if anybody else wants to say anything or ask anything.
And I just wanted to I just made some notes because you said so much good stuff. But just a few call outs really to those again, because there were some things that were said that were just so you know juicy that you know you can't hide from the truth of it. One was, we cannot hurt another without hurting ourselves.
Yeah.
I found that so powerful. But it did remind me of the line, toxicity attracts toxicity.
Yeah.
So, you know, that really stood out to me. There was also something in there about compatibility. When you meet someone, your compatibility might only be very short term, but then because of our programming, we can sometimes try and make it more or different, or try and make ourselves fit or the other person fit.
Yeah.
And that can just be a car crash. Depending on the amount of work we've done and how quickly we can recognise what's workable and what isn't.
Yeah.
I think that there's also something else in there too, when you were saying about what compromises people make, and also, you know, the triggers that we have. And like, I have to say, like, one of the biggest ones I see in relationships is like the breakdown of communication, you know, out of fear, and then we compromise our methods of communication in order to stay, oftentimes.
Yeah.
And that also just turns into a car crash. You know, so yeah, they really stood out for me. It also stood out for me loads what you were saying about men and women and how they should really, you know, in their highest expression, what they can be for each other. But also in their lowest expression, you know, what often happens and all the expectations that are there and misunderstandings that are there. I mean, I see loads of that. But I like what you said at the end, because like you were really showing how things can be if we really do this work, how men and women can be. So yeah, just I love what you shared today. It's really great.
Oh, thanks, Tim. I think if we all become experts on the people in our lives, like if we really see them and hear them and know them, then who's not going to love that? Like everyone is going to love that, because like the universal wound is that we're not seen and we're not felt and we're not heard and we're not known, and like no one gets us or understands us, and like literally every human is suffering from that, because that's the wound that we got from all of our parents, and our parents got that from their parents and their parents before. So like the antidote, we have to be the antidote at this point. So if we start to move towards the people in our lives, or even set the intention, like the future people in our lives, let's become experts on them. Like, let's truly know who they are and support them and appreciate them for who they are, you know, but for who they want to be, you know, and how they want to move forward. Like, we don't want to sort of try to make them better or different to how they are, but we want them to be who they choose to be in the world. And you know, intimacy and connection is, you know, what makes the world go round, and most people don't know how to do that. Like, disconnection is just such a big thing at the moment for everyone, and in so many different ways, you know, division and all intimacy is seeing into another person. So
and seeing yourself.
Yeah, and like you're always going to learn more about yourself from other people, because there's always a reflection, for sure.
I just wanted to add as well, off the back of this show, which has been brilliant. Maybe it'd be good to do a talk on narcissism as well, because I think that's like a big elephant in the room in most people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it would make sense to do that next time.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just after 7, and Dolly hasn't got her show today, so we can go over a bit. Does anybody else want to say anything? If not, then I can finish off. And if anyone's got any suggestions about anything that they would be interested in me covering, then let me know. But yeah, I've enjoyed that. It's been brilliant. Thanks ever so much, everybody, for listening. Okay, so I'll finish the show now. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's brilliant when everybody's here live.
Oh, Jen.
Thanks, Andy. Did I stop that then? I did, didn't I? Yeah.
You have, yes.
Yeah.
Stop the recording, but let the show open, which is, fine now.
Okay, perfect, yeah. Thanks, Andy. All right, well, I'll send that across to you.
Yeah, just post it up onto Holistic Radio, and then I'll link it in with your e-flyer, and you can share it out. Then I'll send it to you, and you can share it out on your groups and channels.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Andy.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks,
Good night.
everybody.
Much love. Bye for now.
Lots of love.